My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Jeff Lewis at Alexana Winery in Dundee. It's December 14th, 2022. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. First question to get you started is why wine?
Why wine? That's a really good question. For me, wine's kind of a confluence of many things that I really enjoy. There's the adventurous side of it. Wine takes me all over the place. And food, anybody who knows me knows that I'm a huge fan of food, as a consumer and as a chef. And yeah, just in general, the depth and rabbit holes you can go into with wine. Like, if you get bored with wine, I don't know what else you need in life, honestly. Wine's fascinating. At one point when I get excited about something and kind of work my way through it, there's some other angle to wine that I end up finding an entry point to that's absolutely fascinating. And it's engagement at the end of the day. It's like there's always something to be engaged with wine, and yeah, it makes you feel good too. It doesn't hurt.
Tell us a little bit about your life before wine. Where were you born and raised, and what did you do kind of after school?
It's kind of a classic wine story. Grew up in Lecompton, Kansas, on a farm, middle of nowhere. No, it's a place where I grew up. It's an amazing place. Not a place that I would see myself living now, but to be able to grow up out in the middle of nowhere on a farm in northeastern Kansas, kind of, rock chalk Jayhawk. Basketball and barbecue, and just incredible people. I think when you grow up in a way where there's not a lot of stuff around in terms of just here you have mountains and oceans. It's like, it's fascinating. It's like, this is incredible. Like, when you grow up in Kansas, I think there's a gratefulness to everything that you see when you're from places like that. And yeah, I grew up kind of luckily in an amazing family. Mom and dad, both super talented people that are somewhat artists in their own sense, woodworker and an art museum curator. So always around food in good old Kansas, and just being shown these amazing things about life at an early age, but without a lot of outlets to go experience them. So, growing up in a small school, if you will, 66 people in my graduating class, like, the world's an amazing place. So, being, I think, from Kansas, growing up there as a kid, pretty cool place to kind of gain an appreciation for all things that are incredible in this world. And yeah, I spent obviously my childhood and adolescence there, and a lot of the people that I grew up with still super close friends of mine, incredible people. But yeah, went to school there for industrial design at the University of Kansas, and kind of fell in love with food at a young age. But all through college, worked in culinary back of the house as a chef, and got really fortunate to kind of be able to have an outlet for my creative side with design and culinary in the same thread, with working with restaurants to develop restaurant concepts from the brand all the way through culinary, and just every aspect of what the brand identity would be that carries through the food, through the experience. So I kind of fell in love with the experience, I guess, in that sense, and got lucky that one of the families who were an investor in one of the projects that I was working on at a young age in my early 20s, they owned a restaurant group and had a number of restaurants, and it was a really incredible Vietnamese woman who was in her 70s who was my business partner. So every day just having lunch with this amazing woman, learned a ton about life, developed a couple restaurant concepts with her, and had the opportunity to develop at 23 years old my own restaurant. Here's a $500,000 budget, here's a space, what do you want to do? And you're 23 years old, you're like, I'm going to do something that makes no sense at all because I don't know any better. So opened the first certified sustainable seafood restaurant off the coast of the United States called, I don't even think I can say it legally, just for my buyout agreement. Yeah, it was an amazing project, and took on a leadership role at a very young age, and did some amazing things with that, and really had a creative outlet to have a ton of fun. And Lawrence, Kansas, I don't know everybody who's been there, downtown Lawrence, Mass Street, pretty historic place full of restaurants and bars, and we were able to create something really unique there, and had a lot of fun. And kind of worked my way through that experience. Started doing wine dinners with all these amazing winery folk, winemakers, and winery owners would come through. We'd put together these amazing events, and I was like, those guys got it figured out. Like, they're doing all the fun stuff. Yeah, it was like, there's more to this. Let's see what's out there. And ended up falling in love with wine through that, through food. Came out to Portland, Oregon, 2010. And yeah, 2010, for those people who lived in Portland in 2010, I call it peak Portland. Like, around that time, like, restaurants were amazing. There's, everything was still pretty calm, and just like, go surfing in the morning, snowboarding at night. This is an amazing place. Get a job at a winery a couple days a week, manage a wine bar in Portland in the evenings. Like, it was a really cool experience to kind of go into a city for the first time and be like, I'm walking to work, 8 minutes to work, gonna go work at the wine bar downtown on the waterfront. Life's awesome, living downtown. And that led me to a really fortunate situation to go meet some people in the wine industry in Argentina, and was like, grew up in Kansas, let's go to Argentina and learn another language, meet some incredible people, and see where it takes me. To be honest, like, coming out of selling the restaurant, it's like, put me on a path to see where it takes me. Let's have some fun. So, cruised down to Argentina, one-way ticket at the time, 38-liter backpack. I knew I was going to the southern end of the country, down to Ushuaia in Patagonia. Going to go to Mendoza. Had a couple of things lined up for harvest internships. And of course, like, nothing goes as planned. I get into Buenos Aires. I'm like, this place is amazing. So had a ton of fun. Made some people I'm still super close friends with, and I go back to Buenos Aires quite a bit still for work. But ended up in a surf town in Mar del Plata, south of Buenos Aires. Spent a month and a half there. Just got to surf in Argentina, make a bunch of friends. I'm like the random gringo from Kansas, cooking dinners for 30 people before we go surfing. Got to enjoy being that role in a group, which was fun. And then worked my way around the country, backpacking, having a blast, putting myself in funny situations that as a kid you would never expect to be in. So you're like, this is cool. Like, I'm at the southern end of the world, at the top of a mountain with some guys from Israel, a couple of guys from Australia, and some people that I met from Spain. Like, this is what you can do. This is cool. Let's keep traveling. Yeah, did a bunch more stuff, kind of traveling around the country. Ended up in Mendoza, Argentina. For those people who've been to Mendoza, it's a special place. You're at the base of the Andes. Got very, very, very lucky, serendipitous to meet somebody who was a wine director for a private vineyard estates program called the Vines of Mendoza, which was at the time just a piece of 1,500-acre property about an hour and a half from the city at the base of the Andes. And it was basically like, hey, we need somebody who speaks English, who knows wine, and you're here. So, like, yeah, it's true. I am. And I was living in a hostel, just hanging out with all these people, cooking dinners for people, having fun, and get up in the morning at 6 a.m., get picked up, drive an hour and a half, 2 hours out to the finca, and teach wine classes to, people who have incredible amounts of wealth, who've achieved incredible things in life. And I'm at the table with these people who are CEOs and executives of some places that, run their industries, and I'm the kid from Kansas who just got done surfing in Patagonia, hanging out, telling them about these vineyards that they've never heard of and these people they've never heard of. And it was amazing. You get to see that discovery in people and what they get excited about wine. You're like, okay, cool. I'm doing something right. This is cool. And ended up doing that for almost 4 months. Thought my time was done, just like living it up every day. We got to the finca and do these classes with these people, and every day finished with an asado, which is like the Argentine barbecue, and it was out in the middle of vineyards, nothing around, no running water, no electricity. There was a ramada, which is just like rama means stick in Spanish, so it was just like vineyard cuttings that covered the place, and we would cook these epic asados, and at the end of each lunch, it was like every day from like 2 o'clock till 6 o'clock, we would just do tons of Fernet and Coke and all these epic wines, and I would be in charge of wine service. And you'd finish the lunch, people were just like, this is the best meal I've ever had in my life. And it wasn't because it's like they had 20 courses at the French Laundry. It was just like what the experience was. So to do that every day for 4 months, it's incredible, like life-changing, and would be for anybody, I think. So left that experience like, okay, I got to go back to Oregon. At least it's spring. So this is, try and time it to come back to Oregon in June, July, like a selfish person would. Like, the sun's out, okay, I'm coming. And came back to Oregon. I did that for basically 4 years. between the wine bar and the vines in Mendoza. They fortunately reached out and were like, hey, you should come back this year. Can you come back? It's like, please. Second year came down and they're like, hey, we're building the restaurant. We're going to build a resort, 22 villas. We're shooting for the stars, leading hotels of the world. I'm like, okay, that's cool. This will be fun. We're going to build a restaurant and we got the chef signed on. I'm like, cool, who's the chef? They're like, I don't know if you're Francis Mallman. I'm like, oh my God. Like been being a chef professionally for 9 years, coming down in like Argentina. Like, of course, Francis Mallman, like Siete Fuegos. I've his books. I'm watching his stuff. This is before the Chef's Table thing came out, and everybody knows about him now. But like, hey, we need somebody who can run the restaurant and get it started. Would you be willing to do that? And I'm like, yes, sure. Not even asking questions like, how much are you gonna pay me? What's my schedule look like? I was like, sure, I'll do it. That sounds great. And again, we didn't at the time. The resort was in progress, so it was crazy. They decided to, we're building the resort. People are still coming down. We're gonna do Siete Fuegos, 7 Fires, Francis Mallman lunch every day. So it was intense. It was me and a group of people. I was the only gringo on the team. I know it might sound offensive, but it's like very familiar and endearing when I was like the guy on the team who was the only guy from the U.S. Everybody else was their local or international from Latin America. And we would put on these absolutely epic lunches every day. Francis was there nearly every day. People come in, I'd walk through, I'd stay in my cabin the night before, make all the cocktail stuff for the welcome drink. People would arrive on horseback. We'd walk them up. I'd walk them through the 7 Fires that we'd started at 3 o'clock in the morning. The chefs were all like super close buddies of mine at that time. We'd go to my cabin after service and drink the rest of the Fernet Coke that was left over. People are going to be like, that's where all that went. And I would cook for the chefs. Like, that was my thing. I was like, validate what, not like the poser chef kid, but like, I want to bring something to the table with you guys, and they're buddies. And we'd do this every day. And it was intense. It was like all those people that I'm still super tight with, and stay in contact with. And it was, people around here, like you kind of come up with your group of people who are at the same era of your progression or trajectory and your what you do. And a lot of those people for me are in Argentina, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So like a lot of my friends now are running amazing culinary programs at, in Buenos Aires and Mendoza, but internationally in Uruguay and in Europe and in France. And we had one of those teams that was just like, you're like, this is special, this is cool. Did that every day I think we did like 90 services in like 2.5 months. And it was just absolutely an incredible thing to be a part of. I look at pictures now and I'm like, I'm super, super lucky. Mm-hmm. And, then Francis's his Chef's Table Netflix episode came out and everybody was like, Francis Mallman. So everybody was seeing photos, was like, that's the guy. You work for that guy? So it was kind of an amazing experience to have, and did that and got really lucky to get pulled into a situation where I'm at right now. Alexana, the owner of this property, Dr. Ivana, had bought a piece of property down there in that same little area, this rockiest area of Uco Valley where the finca for the vines of Mendoza was. And it's like, hey, building a winery down in Uco Valley, we have the ability to make these amazing wines. Would you want to be, I need somebody there who I can trust. So came back here and worked with them in Oregon at Alexana back in 2014. And, this place was much smaller then and kind of like VIP hosting people, doing director of education role, had a lot of fun, got to tie into everything we do and watch this place grow and be a big part of that. And then they would kick me back to, as things slowed down here, kick me back to Argentina, and did that basically for 6 years. And it's kind of part of all the programs that we did. And incredible to be a part of the growth of a project from the ground up in Argentina. And I could talk about that project for the next week. You could do like a series of podcasts on that. Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. We started out in the middle of nowhere in an ancient riverbed at the base of the Andes and no electricity for 4 years, ran a winery on a generator for 4 years just because it was out in the middle of nowhere. And just like such an incredible thing to be a part of, not just any project from the ground up, which is also an incredible thing. I think anybody who's ever been a part of a winery from land development on, it's a special thing. Mm-hmm. Stressful and exhausting, but it's special. And to be able to do it for a place that really is differentiated by everything else around it. I'm a pioneer in a sense that we planted some grapes that nobody else had been doing down there. And yeah, it's something that I think I'll hopefully look at when I'm a much older man and be proud of.
Well, we definitely will come back to that. Maybe not for a whole week, but we'll talk about it some more here in a second. But I want to back up a little bit because you obviously covered a lot. You covered a lot of. No, that's the whole point here. So I'm going to back up a little bit to kind of first restaurant experience. You mentioned this kind of connection you make and having this chance to at 23 to kind of create something, and tell me about that experience for you. What were you kind of hoping you'd get out of it, and what kind of at the end, as you look back, what did you get out of it? How was the experience? How did it go?
Yeah, the restaurant. Oh wow. I think going into it, being naive, honestly, being young and being told, hey, put the sweat equity in, you'll get out of it. And I'm always someone who's going to put in max effort, just how I grew up. So for me, it was just like, I think you find through those experiences, you find your thresholds on where you get maxed out, and I'm fortunate that maybe fortunate, I don't know if it's fortunate or not, maybe just stupid, but I pushed through those things, and it's like I found a new limit that I think it was exhausting, but I think when you get in that zone as somebody who is a creative or somebody who's a business person, it can be exhausting, but it's super fulfilling, because I think you feel like you're doing something that you didn't know you were capable of. And from a culinary standpoint, the creative outlet was incredible, like being able to every day make the decisions that I wanted to make and get on the phone to the team in Hawaii and all these teams around, because you're in Kansas, people say seafood in Kansas, what do you do? And you're like, well, actually, if you look at the logistics of how seafood works in terms of how it gets around the country, the halibut that you're getting in New York City isn't coming from the Atlantic, and the salmon that you're getting isn't coming from the Atlantic, and those oysters, Blue Point oysters that you're getting from aren't coming from California. So it's like everything crosses over, and Kansas City International Airport's where a lot of these companies kind of make their stops and reconsolidate things and just distribute out of. So it's kind of fun because we got to cherry pick. And so the creative side of it was like, what came in this morning? Like bringing in razor clams, which here in Oregon everybody knows razor clams, but in Kansas people are like, what are razor clams? These things look crazy. But we brought in whole fish. Everything was fresh and whole fish, which was crazy. So we'd bring in massive 80-pound halibut, Hawaiian opa, and anybody who's ever worked with fish in terms of a fishmonger cutting fish up, they're aliens, I swear. They're so crazy. So we'd bring in all these things, and I learned a ton about just, I think, from the culinary side, creative, but also business. You got to numbers. They got to make sense, and being responsible at 23 years old for a team of 40 people, that'll change how you look at everything that you do in the wine industry. So everything I look at, it has to make sense. It's like I think you've had an ownership perspective, you look at things differently, and you look at the cost of things, and you treat, not everybody, but I think a lot of people who have, you treat things as if it's your own money because you know what it's like, and you know how hard it is to find people who do that. But yeah, the culinary side, the creative side, leadership side of it, all, I think, parts of my personal journey that have been really impactful. But also, I think, because of that, also being tied to it, so intense for, get there at 8 a.m, be there until 2 p.m, just crushing yourself at a young age and being responsible. Being able to separate yourself from that, put a backpack on and travel to Patagonia, there's an appreciation that you get from that. You're grateful.
You mentioned while you were there, that's when you sort of started coming into contact with winemakers and winery owners coming through the restaurant. Tell me about wine becoming something you're more interested in. Obviously, you start with food.
Yeah.
What point does wine start to become more important or kind of increase its importance in your life?
Yeah, it wasn't financial, that's for sure. I think wine was always just a mechanism for me, as somebody who's has their certifications, and I love wine. I geek out on wine, and I think people who know me are oh yeah, Jeff will go over the top and learn everything about how many times that they've grafted over a certain rootstock in regions and give you percentages on water uptake for different rootstocks. But for me, it's always been a way to maybe kind of appease the curiosity of things, and I never get bored with wine. And I think at the restaurant, working with wine when I started, it was always a struggle. It was a challenge. You feel, I don't want to say vulnerable and inadequate when you don't know wine and you're someone who wants to know stuff. So the sales reps and the winemakers come in, they're speaking about wine in a vernacular that I'm well, I don't know what tannins are. And like everyone kind of goes through this in their own evolution of wine, I think. And there's an insecurity that makes you want to be better. But yeah, we talk about this stuff, and I didn't have I was like, I knew what I liked, I knew what I didn't like. And as soon as I learned more about not just kind of the science of wine, but like why certain wines were special and the narrative and the story. And I think I've always been someone I love storytelling. I love narrative. I think it's fascinating. And wine, as much as any product in the world, that's what it is. You know, it is really amazing that you learn about these wines, and it's a story that makes you, like, as much as the wine, it's the story that makes the wine so special. So like that was a big part of it. It was a draw to like be connected to those types of places, whether it's not like that exact place, but to find places like that and be a part of it. You know, like people come here and they feel like this is one of the most magical, unique places that they've ever been, and like to be a part of that is really amazing.
Was there, you mentioned obviously getting certifications, education in wine. Was there a moment at which you decided that was something you needed to do to become sort of certified, qualified in wine?
Yeah, definitely. I think and it comes from like coming out to Oregon and feeling like I had done a lot at an early age, and feeling like, oh, I have done the restaurant, I've done all this design stuff, I know my stuff. And coming to Oregon, you learn really quickly, and I think a lot of people who've come out here, wherever you're from, a lot of times it doesn't matter what you know. And they're like, where else have you worked in Oregon? You're like, nowhere, I'm new. And they're like, so I mean, I'm not going to name names, but I applied, like I was at tasting rooms here in the Willamette Valley, and I didn't get the job. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, okay. And it was like, you don't have the experience. It was because you don't have the experience. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And so I think it was like, cool, I'm going to, a little chip on the shoulder. Like, I'm going to, I'm a person, I want to learn stuff. So I was learning. I was going to the Multnomah Public Library downtown and stacking my book bag full of books and from wine, and went out of control and studied everything. I posted notes everywhere, like just dove in deep and was like, cool, what do I need to do? What do I need to know? I'm going to learn everything. And I was like, at first, I'm going to learn about wine so I can use my design background, and I'm going to be a consultant. Travel the world. Be the design guy who's the somm, who knows everything about wine. Not everything, but knows at a level that most design people don't. And that was the original idea. Fill the book bag full of books, go home and have a pull-up bar to put the book bag on, and when I was in shape before I became an old man, apparently. But yeah, I mean, that was a big part of it. Just those certifications, I feel like I don't know if they were necessary, but they were necessary for me in my development of kind of challenging myself, I guess, and knowing, and also just to have an understanding. I think certifications have changed a lot. I think 2010 when I started to take my, CMS and WSET and Certified Specialist of Wine, CSW. The wine industry, it's always evolving, but it was a very different evolution at that time. So yeah, just like learning stuff, and it was things that I hadn't been exposed to, and gained a lot of knowledge. And of course, the longer you're in wine, you realize you don't really know anything. So yeah, those certifications are super impactful for me. Like, it put me on the trajectory, I think, and validated so much of what I needed to have validated by the outside looking in, being like, oh, you got your CMS, you're in the diploma program. Okay, you belong. You're like, cool, thanks, guys.
So what brought you to Oregon? Why did you choose here, and what were your first impressions of Oregon?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would love to hear everybody's answers to that. Yeah, I think what brought me here was my older brother, who's 3 years older than me, a really amazing person. He came out here when I was in high school, moved out here. He's an artist. And I came out here, like everybody else was going to spring break to all the warm places. I was like, I'm going to go see my brother in Portland, Oregon. Seems like a good place to be in March. Came out here and it was rainy, and it was Oregon, northwestern Oregon. And it was beautiful. And it was like, this is a fascinating place. Like the food scene was, this was like 2005 maybe, and it was like, this is a really cool place. Like, and I'd come back a couple times with him, and to be honest, like after I sold my restaurant, my little sister, she's kind of a boss lady, CEO now, super impressive person. She was younger than me and came out here to run a program for a corporation, and I'd come out here almost simultaneously on a road trip. I sold my restaurant, traveled around East Coast, saw cousins and aunts and people I'd have maybe met once in my life, but was like, sold my restaurant, doing stuff. Did the East Coast, came out here, picked up my brother, he was living in Arizona. We did that, you know, anybody who hasn't done the 101 road trip, do it. You have to. But yeah, we did that, came up to Portland, and I basically never left. So came up, finished up for Christmas here in Portland, and absolutely fell in love with it. It was, like I said, get up in the morning, go out to Shorty's, go out to Indian Beach, you know, catch some swell, survive, which is always good. And then head up to Mount Hood and go up to Ski Bowl with my night pass. That was $99, and go snowboarding. Just like the fact that that was a thing, you know, and it was incredible. And I was like, for me, it was all the stuff that I didn't even know existed as a kid growing up. And I was just like, this is amazing. And there's obviously a lot of special places, but, and then you throw in the food and the wine aspect. It's like, there's so much stuff that I love about life that's here.
So on that note of the wine aspect, what were your impressions of Oregon's wine scene at that time?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is good. Haven't thought about this stuff in a long time. I'm trying to think like the funny stuff I did. Like when I first got out here, like I went on. It was, you didn't know, there was an entry point. It wasn't like, hey Jeff, here's some people you should meet. It was kind of like, okay, let's learn about it. So I remember going to get like the Dundee Hills Passport Tour thing and the North Limit, like the places you would get the booklet and pay a certain amount, and then you go see a bunch of wineries. And chef friends in Portland that I'd go out with, we'd all get in the car and we'd go see 11 wineries in a day, you know, like go see stuff. And that was kind of the entry point, was just kind of understanding what a winery was. Like I hadn't been to a winery until I was 26, 27 years old. It's kind of like, what is this place? How does this work? What is it like? So to experience the places and get out here and see it, and then from there, kind of being at the wine bar, making contacts with the people in the industry, and then going to the tastings and going to, you know, the Equinox at Zenith, the E.O. Amity thing that they used to do down there, and tasting through all the E.O. Amity producers. And, you know, I volunteered to do stuff to meet people. I do like the Indie Wine Festival, you know, just like get out there and see these things and see the different movements going on. And, you know, that was a time, I think, you know, 2010, 11 isn't a long time ago, but a lot has changed in the Oregon wine industry. A lot of the personalities that were that generation that started were still around and still super involved. And you'd go to the shows and see them, and they would be tasting, and they would be representing their brands. That's changed a lot now, but that's what it was like. And so I think to be here at that time was really cool. And people like Cole Danauer, you know, the journalist, and I'd reach out to him when I first moved here because I'd read his stuff and I was really impressed with him, and, you know, connecting with people like that, and him, you know, showing me places to go, people to meet, and just like that generation of people who were like, they kind of came up in the first wave, and they weren't just the names, but they were doing it, and to be able to be around why they were still active, I think it's something I'm grateful that I got to see, like kind of a portion of that. Obviously, there's people who would say, well, yeah, you missed the 80s and the 90s. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure it was the same kind of feeling. Every generation has that feeling. So I'm grateful that I got to catch that previous generation and see some of that stuff. Because, yeah, it was, you know, AVAs were defined. I think single vineyard stuff was, like, going crazy. Everybody was making their Shea vineyards. There was the Touche event that you could go to down at Rash and all that stuff. And, yeah, I mean, saw kind of the price increase movement where things started to break over $60, $50, $60 a bottle normally, and kind of a huge growth. You look at the stats, what was going on in, you know, 2010, 2011, you know, coming out of a huge recession, there wasn't a lot of things happening in terms of new development at that time. There wasn't a lot of huge plantings going on at that time, and so to be there for that, kind of like everybody's kind of like really hustling, making things work, and then to go into the 2010s and just like and to be here and be a part of that, kind of like putting it back into gear and being able to be a part of that movement was, and we're, you know, fortunate in the Oregon wine industry that we are in every aspect of growth, the right type of growth, you know, per bottle average and production and exports and market growth for on-prem and off-prem, everything's way up. And yeah, every wine region has its own evolution, and you study it, and being part of 3 wine regions, Napa, Oregon, and Argentina, you kind of see that happen. And Oregon's like, we're in the middle of a really amazing golden era, so to feel like you're a part of it's really, really amazing.
So before we talk more about the project in Argentina, I'm curious, after meeting Dr. Ravana and coming here, tell me about this place and what it was like for you and what your kind of initial role was in the company.
Yeah, so when I first came to Alexana, I think it was 2011. It was before I worked here. I mean, anyone who's ever been to Alexana, regardless of, what the experience was in terms of, there's incredible wines here, and they'll take the wines out of it. It's the place. And you come up over this driveway on the backside of the Dundee Hills, you're like, where am I, first of all? And then you just, you peek over the driveway, and the valley opens up towards the Coast Range, and you're like, this is cool. And you come around the driveway into the winery, and you go into the tasting room and open up, and it's the view of the vineyard, it gets better. And that was my experience. My experience was this place is incredible. I've been to a lot of wineries in the Willamette Valley, and there's a lot of stunning properties, and everybody's property is unique in its own way. But this is I think a lot of people who come here are like, this is different. Mm-hmm. This feels different. The view, the backside of the Dundee Hills, the undulations, the soils, the mid-slope, just the facility. You're like, this is... So that was my impression. I think I took that away. I was like, this is different. Impressed by it. I didn't know I was going to be a part of it. And then being able to meet Dr. Ravana and, a couple people like Mark Bosco and John Gablehausen were here, and Brian Weil, people who I had become friends with ahead of working here. And it was just I want to be a part of this. This is cool. Mm-hmm. Riesling was the best Riesling. No offense to anybody, but I thought it was definitely one of the best Rieslings in the Willamette Valley. Blew my mind, that Riesling. And then the Pinot Gris too, and I'm like, this place makes amazing white wine. Mm-hmm. And then to taste the Pinots and have some I was drinking 07 Shea at the time, and when we made a Shea vineyard, and some of the it's right after they had gotten the top 100 for the first time here, and just being that era, this place had just kind of come on the map, if you will. Mm-hmm. It's still hidden, but people were like, oh, what's going on over there on the backside of the Dundee Hills? And again, it started off super small, tiny little tasting room. There was just a handful of us. I remember being downstairs and with my colleague, Amy Kersley, now Amy Cloak, down in there, and we'd be doing dual duty. I'd be doing stuff for Argentina and Napa, working on things. She'd be doing shipping, wine club, and bell rings. You're like, oh, someone's upstairs. You got to run up there and host a tasting. And just to go from that, and there's people before me who even, started here longer, who had a smaller part of that culture when it was even smaller team. So to see it go from that to look at the talk reservation and for a Saturday, and you're like, wow, that's impressive. And it's all private appointment, but where we are now, we're fortunate because I think a lot of wineries, it's what they aspire to get to in terms of an organic visitation for private appointment at this level. It's an amazing place. And I love the story. Dr. Vaughn's got an incredible story. The property itself is, I feel confident when I'm telling the story that it is a special place. Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So obviously, you talked earlier about the project in Argentina, Corazon del Sol. Correct? Is that right?
Yes. Okay. Heart of the sun, if you will.
So tell me about the vision as you understood it, and what your role was in making this kind of impossible dream happen.
Yeah, the vision. And this is one thing I love about Dr. Ravana is he is a visionary. He sees things and says it, and people don't always understand how he's articulating it in terms of that was intentional. But he went down there, it was a very unintentional visit for him. He went down there trying to get into Brazil for Carnival, didn't realize he needed a visa, ends up in Buenos Aires. This is a very Dr. Ravana thing, just really fortunate human being. People are like, you're fun, I like you, this guy's great, come with me. And they took him, and he ended up out in Nuco Valley doing what I was doing every day with people, doing that asado out in the middle of the vineyard. And so many people, they're like, this is the best lunch I've ever had in my life. And he fell in love with it. And he's the type of person where if you get him excited, and he appreciates quality, and when it comes to wine, the guy's always loved Chateauneuf du Pape. He's the one who introduced me to Chateau Reyes and had some incredible bottles of Chateauneuf with Doc. And he was just like, this is Chateauneuf du Pape in the mountains at 3,600 feet in elevation. Let's taste some Rhone blends. And they're like, there are no Rhone blends because there's no Grenache and Lavender planted anywhere. And he's like, let's plant some. Okay. So, yeah, that was the vision. The vision was like, I'm going to do something that's different than anybody else. And I appreciate that about Dog. Like, to go out there, not just say you're going to do it or buy fruit from somebody. It's like, I'm going to risk it and I'm going to buy this land, plant this land, and try it. And, planted the first Grenache in all of Los Chicayes subzone of Buco Valley. I think there was, the Instituto Nacional Vitivinicola. It was like the Consejo, the regulatory body of Argentina. I got stats from them back when I first started to try and figure out like how much was planted. It was like 8 hectares of Grenache in the entire country at that time. Nobody had it. Mourvèdre even less. And from there, kind of that vision just, I think, exploded in terms of like, this is working. Let's continue. And he went from 8 acres, added 3 more acres, added a plot where he could build a winery, and planted 6 more acres. To the point where he had 17 and built a winery in 2014. And I think the vision for him has always been produce the best wines, quality over everything. Like, and that's a true statement. Anybody who goes to our wineries, you walk into the production facility, and that's what's most important. People say a lot of stuff, but when you see a production facility, you can glean a lot. And I think anyone who comes to production facility is like, you guys, this is serious. Like, this is quality. That's what you care about, is quality. 2-ton micro fermenters and, gravity flow winemaking and, tiny presses and all that stuff. It's like, this is quality. And that's been from day one, was quality in Argentina and trying to do something no one else did. And I was totally attracted to that, like, to be able to be a part of something that I respected. Like, I remember before working with Doc, I never told him this, but like having these super, influential VIPs for the Vines Mendoza, and I'd be out there by myself, and they'd be like, hey, we have some people coming in. They're coming in at like midnight. They're running late. Their flight came in late. Meet them, go greet them, and supposed to take them to the winery and like show them around real quick. And I'd like sneak into the barrel room, find the 2011 Ravana Luminoso GSM that I was supposed to pull samples for the next day. We'd top them, obviously, with the topping wine we have, but pull the sample and share it with some people, and they would just be like, what is this? You're like, that's the first ever GSM from Argentina, 2011. So like to be there and be a part of like the winemaking for his project at a time where I wasn't part of it, and remember that wine. Like 2011, I think I have some pictures of me like standing in front of the barrel. But like 2011 Luminoso GSM, first ever GSM from Argentina, having that barrel and being able to, and I was the one pulling samples for analysis for stuff at the Vines, and just tasting that wine and thinking about like, not even thinking it was like a historic wine, but to think about it now, like to not just tell the story, but to live the story. And you're like, yeah, I was there when we started it. Like I wasn't there when Doc bought the property, but like the first wines we ever made, I was part of that process.
So tell me about the logistics then of making wine in that kind of place and creating something when there is no power, there's no water. How did those years kind of unfold, and how did the project take shape?
Yeah, anybody who's probably visited Argentina but done business, it is an incredibly difficult place to do business. Incredibly difficult. Siesta culture, everything close from 1 to 5. Hyperinflation, like we freak out at 7% annual inflation here. Like everybody like doesn't know what to do. We have 7% inflation monthly in Argentina. Like it's normal. So to do anything there is incredibly challenging. And we, started off feeling really confident about it, and then, we're building the winery, production facilities looking good. It's like working with these incredible architects. The property's amazing, and the Dempsey electrical company's like, cool, we're gonna run power lines to you. You'll have them in 6 months. 6 months. We'll have them to you in 6 months. Like, okay, 6 months later, a year later. And 4 years. Like, we ran that winery on a generator for 4 years, and we started from nothing. It was like, Docs, I'm building a winery, need you to develop a tasting room, hospitality program, domestic distribution, and I was very, very fortunate. One of the people that I first connected with when I went to Argentina, her name's Carolina Fuller, Laquero. She was at Tepiz at the time running hospitality. She's like, Santiago Archibald is our consulting winemaker down there, and everybody knows Santi. Caro is to Santi for hospitality in Argentina. Everyone knows her. She's like one of the most respected people in the wine industry down there. And we had met. She had set me up with a little thing at Tepiz when I was traveling, and we were hiring people for the role at Corazon del Sol to open up. Her resume came across, and I was like, Caro, done. So it was her and I. We were the two people by ourselves developing this winery. No electricity. We're like built this incredible place. Going to Buenos Aires, finding chairs, getting custom tables made by this incredible woodworker. Just kind of create the whole experience from the ground up. It was incredible. But like you're doing it with no electricity. So, we're like candles in the underground cava, and people loved it. Like people were just like, they're part of history too. Like this is incredible. And we were on the grind. 7 days a week, no rest, leave Mendoza. And I, of course, would like drive forever from Mendoza City, 90 minutes to work every day like an idiot. And, get up at 6 in the morning, get home at 10:30 at night some nights, and 7 days a week. And her and I think she probably looks at it the same way. Like it was amazing. Like we got to basically build a foundation for something that had never been done before. And it was a challenge. Everything was a challenge. The first 3 years of our estate, 14, 15, and 16, those were 3 of the wettest years on record. And we're on an ancient riverbed, is what we call it. But in 2016, that ancient riverbed was ancient because they had diverted it away for irrigation along the highway. And when that irrigation canal overflows, they let water back into that riverbed. And we would have to like basically ford a river to get to work every day. It was crazy. And like I remember, we made it fun, right? Like I would put the rosé, I'd build like a wall. And this is like being out in the mountains in Montana, all those big river rocks. Build a wall and have like the bottles of rosé, and people show up and you're like, oh, welcome to Los Chicayes. Here's the geology, history, and all the amazing things. Come with me over here. And you like go to the river and you're telling the story, and you're like bend down and you grab the rosé out of the water. And they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And just doing that kind of fun stuff with people, and people were just like blown away by it. And it was fun because you just got, this is my like love for experience. Like you get to create an experience that's never been, there's no template for it out there, what we were doing. Everyone was trying to do these like 4-hour lunches and 6 courses, and we're like, make people feel that they're connected to the place, which has always been my thing. Like, make people, give them a reason to be emotionally connected to a place and the people. And that's what we did, and it was incredible. And we did some incredible things, and that project, Corazon del Sol, Google it, that project now, it's like I was just meeting with I manage that team, fortunately, and they're super close friends of mine, all of them. I've known them for a long time. And, on the Zoom today with them, we're going over, here's all the latest ratings we've gotten the last week. It's like 95, 95, 95, 96, 94. And this is all the major publications. And I'm just like, can we just all stop for a minute and just say, like, this is incredible. Like, let's get this out there. Like, we're doing some special stuff, you guys. So it's always gonna be a part of who I am, like Corazon del Sol. But to be honest, for my career at the company, it's what kept me here. When there was people who were like, "Hey, we can pay you more. You can have this role," and I was like, "But Argentina? Do you have anything in Argentina?" But yeah, it's the truth. Like I love that country, and the people are incredible, and it's in some ways feels. And I love Oregon, like I said, but like a lot of times when I'm there, it feels I'm more at home, even though I have not the family, my wife and my son and our homes here. But when I leave that, it's like Argentina feels a lot of times more familiar.
So obviously it's a pretty unique setup here with that project there, the project in Napa and here in Oregon. Tell me how your role has evolved over the years, and what your role is now in the company.
Yeah, gosh, so much. I think my title for a long time, since I started until last October when I took over as kind of like managing director of all 3 properties, was director of education, and it was like this kind of funny title. I think I got promoted to director of education 3 times over my 7 years doing that. But it was like I did so many things. Gosh, it was kind of like if there's a problem with the company or it needs improvement, send Jeff. Hey, we need to open a winery in Argentina. Hey, we need to develop some, DTC programs in Oregon. Hey, we need to grow wholesale because we made a bunch of wine in 2014 and 15. And a big part of what I did, outside of Argentina and being a part of this program here and DTC focused, was wholesale. I spent basically 2016 through last year on the road 45 weeks of the year. just like on that, anyone who's done that, I mean, they already know who I am because we've traveled together probably. But yeah, that's a crazy job, national sales and just like distribution. But having said that, it's an incredible thing to do. And it's like, I don't know how people do that for more than 10 years, to be honest, because it's exhausting. But I just can't imagine, again, my trajectory without doing that. Like the connections I've made over the years and the people I know around, it's the big leagues of the wine industry. Mm-hmm. Like it's where all the crazy money is being exchanged, all the distribution, all the retail, all the restaurant groups. And we're fortunate that Dr. Ivana, 20 years of running distribution, 3 wineries, that network is insane. So you get plugged into the big leagues immediately. And those 4 years, 5 years of doing that were amazing. I got to, hosting wine dinners 3 times a week, traveling, going and being, taking groups of Psalms down to Argentina, going down to Napa for Premier Napa Valley, traveling and doing stuff with the Oregon Wine Board, being in Mexico, being in Canada, being on a flight one week, being in Georgia, doing stuff at, all these amazing steakhouses and country clubs, and then fly to Palm Springs, and then fly to Jackson Hole, and then, all this. And you get to see the world. And like, again, being a kid from Kansas, you're like, put me on a plane. I got on a plane, I think I was like 17 years old first time I got on an airplane. And then you get to the point where you're like, get me off a plane. Like, I do not want to be on another airplane. And I got to that point where it's like, yeah, we've done some amazing stuff. And I have a really incredible colleague in distribution. He's our VP of sales, Dylan York, who I got really lucky because when I got into wholesale, our program was, there wasn't a ton of strategy, a ton of direction. It was kind of like, let's have fun, selling wine. And Dylan, working with him, I was here before him, and I knew a lot about our wines, but working with him was incredible. Like, still to this day, like, we talk, we might as well be married. I mean, we talk he's East Coast, so I drive out to work, we talk, and like, we get our, 8 hours a week talking and strategizing, and I learned a ton about distribution to the point where I'm on the Oregon Wine Symposium teaching people how to do distribution, and I'm grateful that I got that time to learn that. And him and I I'm in charge of all 3 properties, but a big part of what I do is working with that guy. It's been incredible. But distribution, amazing experience. And a lot of my friends in the Oregon wine industry, like just people that you travel with, and there's that camaraderie, and there's some funny people in distribution on the supplier side, and you kind of find your people. And those people, I think they're incredibly talented wine professionals, and there's a lot of them in Oregon.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned your role now as the kind of manager of all 3 spaces. Tell me how that came about and how that sort of changed your life. How it changed your role.
Yeah, it did definitely changed everything. This was last October 2021. The same day, the president of the company and the GM of Alexana announced that they have other opportunities that they're leaving for. And we're all like, a couple days before, I get a call from Dr. Ivanovic in Croatia. They told him why he was in Croatia. And he's like, calls me, I'm in San Diego doing distribution, doing some wine dinners. He's like, and he knows that we traveled the world together, and I do all these trips to Argentina, and we, at this time, had traveled together probably 50 trips and talk all the time. And he's like, hey, this is what's going on. Like, would you be interested in being GM of Alexana? And I'm like, yes. And he always goes back to that. He's like, you didn't even ask me anything about, like, and I was like, I didn't care. Like, I've been ready to do that job for a long time. I've been wanting to do that job for a long time. Like, this place is incredible. I know this place inside and out. We have an incredible team of people. Like, being ready, able to lead the team is something that I feel like is an incredible honor that I continue to have to earn. And the president, he had left. And at first it was kind of like, I think I can do that. Like, I know I've been doing all this stuff with him for years. But it's like, you always underestimate yourself, right? You're like, are you ready to do that? Because that's a big commitment. Like, you think about it, and it just kind of morphed into it where I end up just assuming that role by default because everybody leaves, and it's kind of like somebody's got to do it. And I started taking stuff on, and to the point where I think for me it was kind of like being able to be in a cramped space and finally being able to stretch. And you're just like, I think I can actually affect the things that I wanted to affect for a long time. And I think when you're an employee and you're not at that top level of leadership or the ability to, that you have a pulse on things in a different way. And I had 7 years of knowing exactly how everybody in the company felt and where the problem points were. And those problem points move with teams and dynamics and timings of things. But at that moment, I was really tuned in, and I just got to like meet with everybody, and everybody's like, "What's happening?" And I'm like, "I think we're okay. I think we're okay. And here's some things that we're gonna do." And you know, kudos to this team in Alexana. People who've been here since that transition. I mean, if you get a resume from anyone at Alexana who worked here at that time, they're good people and they know how to do things and they hustled. Incredible. Everyone kind of just elevated, and it was just like we had all this potential the whole time, and you know, kind of like there was a lot of that I had realized, and just like giving people the chance and being like, "You want to grow? Do you want? I mean, if you're comfortable with what you're doing, that's fine. Do you want to grow? You have the potential to grow. I need you. You know, the team needs you." And we had a lot of people grow into that, and I got to grow probably beyond what I should do in terms of I'm, you know, kind of active general manager of 3 properties simultaneously, which I do not recommend to anybody to do. But yeah, I mean, it's an incredible thing, and I get to affect all this stuff, and we're taking on huge projects, which is amazing and makes you feel like you're part of something special at that moment. And but also like the growth we've seen here, like Alexana. I'm not going to say numbers of stuff. People who have community benchmark and do the cohorts, they probably have a general idea of what we do. But yeah, I mean, we saw 34% growth over the last 12 months, and like to see that and be in a leadership position, and after a transition, you're just kind of like, am I responsible for that? Is it the team? I don't know. Sure, I guess I helped do that. You know, like I feel like I'm impacting it, and yeah, we've had seen growth pretty much everywhere. Corazon del Sol, like the growth there has been incredible because that's like the language that I'm literally and figuratively feel fluent with, and that team just kind of like having that direct line of communication with them, and hey, what's your input? What do you guys feel like needs to happen? Why you should be doing this? Like this is what you do so well, and just getting people bought in who want to be bought in, and then finding talent and bringing it in and giving them a reason to stay, giving them a reason to be part of it. And yeah, my role's changed a ton. I mean, I feel it goes back to the restaurant side of things. Like I'm so grateful I had the experience running a business, doing payroll, running our accounting, running P&Ls, putting like knowing what our capital needs were and being able to do projections and labor costs and all that stuff, and applying that to a program that never really had a lot of that done in a way that I feel it should be done, but also bringing in people in roles that the company's never had, or a financial controller for the first time. Just a lot of stuff that's like, this company is different than it was 10 years ago. Like this is an incredibly successful program. Fortunately, like we're very lucky we have an incredible team and incredible supporters, but I think you come here and you learn how wineries work and you see what's going on here and you're like, yeah, this is amazing. Like you guys are cruising. And to be a part of that and lead it is really cool. But yeah, but to be able to affect change is what keeps me engaged with that, and trying to help people grow, I guess. The biggest thing for me, I stop the team sometimes. I'm like, they're like, why are you getting so sentimental? I'm like, stop. Everyone should stop what they're doing right now and just think like, there's those times when you're on a team and you like look back at years of the people you've worked with and you're like, man, that was a really good group of people. Like that was special. And that's sometimes like, hey, just acknowledge it. Like take a time and look around and say like, this isn't what most places have. And we're not all going to be here forever. Like you're going to go on and probably run a winery. You're going to go run a winery. You're going to run a winery. You're going to be a head winemaker. And like right now, I feel like we have a lot of that at Alexana. So I don't take it for granted. I'm just like, you guys are awesome. Thank you. Thanks for believing in it. And we're growing, so it's like now I got to find more people. So it's like just trying to, it's not to overuse the word culture because so much of it is beyond that. But find people who care in a way that the rest of the team cares, that are high trust people. It's all about trust.
So as you stepped into that role, tell me about sort of, you talk about the growth you've seen in the last year and your possible impact on that. What were the things you thought needed the most attention, or what were the first things you thought you needed to deal with?
Yeah, it was a mix. It was a lot. You could ask the team, like Jeff changed too much too quick. It was exhausting, and it's definitely true. Like I'm the kind of person like, you see 8 problems, and I say, okay, cool. we're doing these two, and then these two. And we can start a little bit on each one, and here's where we need to get it to. And I think the biggest thing, the number one focus at first was just underlying this team. Like, don't steer the ship in a direction without having everybody on board thinking the same thing. So the first step was really just like, sit down with everybody. What's working and what's not working in your world? Who are you working with that you're like, we need to think about improving that relationship? Who's, where do you think we could be more successful? What do you care about? Where can you contribute? Mm-hmm. And be like, have those conversations. And that's how I remember the conversations. But, having those conversations and trying to create action plans, having a Google Doc for each person and being like, this is our running agenda, add to it. I'm managing 30 different people across 3 wineries. So like, I'm going to be with you and we're going to have a meeting. We're going to go through stuff, give action plans, but I might not get back to you for like 2 weeks. So like, you need to hit me with changes. And just trying to do that. And, a lot of it was reactionary, not a thing that I like to be, but sometimes you have to be reactionary. Because if you're proactive, you're like, cool, I'm focused on this. You're like, well, everything's just falling apart behind you, so cool. So a lot of it was just kind of like putting things in place. And, things that I love is really, understanding, it's the numbers, the analytical side of it. Like, you can't make smart decisions if you don't know the numbers. So just getting in and looking at things, where we're trending, good and bad, identify why, and then kind of build on it or course correct. And a lot of what I've tried to do, and I've been really lucky to have great people on board with it, is see opportunities and identify the risks and really work to move things in a direction that we want to be in 5 years. And it's not about like short-term revenue, and that's kind of the thing that I'm trying to get people focused on. It's like anybody can go out and sell wine for a discount and sell wine quickly. But is that sale that you made, are they going to buy wine again? Are they going to buy it when you do a price increase? What are you doing to engage people? And like, just move in that direction. And we saw growth, but we saw growth with taking the lowest price point wines out of our program this year. And to like take off that low-hanging fruit and still grow was, I think, for me, the biggest thing that I think everybody on the team was like, it should be really proud of. Because we grew in the way that we need to be growing. I think the way that most people want to be growing. And there's a lot of changes on production and getting things dialed in. And when you own, your own vineyard, things change. We planted a 45-acre vineyard, the property that we bought in December 18. So that's just being planted, and the first fruit came off of it this year. So we have 100 acres of vines that'll be online in the Dundee Hills. So a lot of it's like, here's what the program is, here's where it's going. Let's plan and make sure that every bottle that's in the inventory that's aging has a strategy, and every plant that's in the ground has a strategy. And that's what it's been, is a lot of departmental growth based on what the fixed variables are that we're working with and where we want to go, and some, trying to keep it fun for everybody too, I guess. But we've changed. Any people who work here are like, tell them about this, but it's so much stuff that we've changed. And the stuff that's not fun to talk about, that I think never gets talked about in the wine industry, the management side of things, like how you manage all the really fun things about, commissions and aging inventory, and with that, it makes the team stronger, and I think it makes your program stronger. And we've made some tough decisions, and people have gotten on board, and I think there's a lot. The trust level, which is super important to me. Like if everybody trusts each other and they're heading in the right direction, that's the team you want. Like I'll take somebody who, people who are extremely talented who nobody trusts. That's not helping anybody. So like, just get good people who care, who you can have really clear conversations with, and that's what we're trying to do.
So to back up a step to 2020 and the impacts of that year on your life and on the wine industry as you saw it. Tell me about your memories of 2020. Obviously, early in the year of the pandemic, late in the year with a rough harvest. How did it affect your life? What were the changes you had to make, and the company had to make, and sort of how did you come out the other side?
2020. Everybody probably views it under a certain lens. I think everybody kind of different interactions with 2020. I think challenging for anybody. I think for us, we were somewhat lucky in terms of production, but I think in terms of just being limited in what we do so well, which is relationships. Like what's made Dr. Ivano's 3 wineries successful is, people who were in previous leadership were great at building relationships, and we continue that. And it's like, if you take that away from people and like, Zooms, virtuals, there's certain aspects. We did a lot of those and they worked, but it's like, there's no substitute for being able to travel and spend time with people and go on trips. And we did a trip to Argentina where I take 23 couples down to Argentina and we spend a week together. And it's our top clients from, 20 years of support. And that's gone. All of our wine dinners that we do that we're doing 2 or 3 a week, those are gone. You take away your appointment volume, that's gone. And it's like just recalibrating. And with that comes good and bad decisions, because everybody's kind of like, oh, we need to sell wine. We do need to sell wine. Nobody knows what's going to happen. What are you going to do? Do you discount stuff? Do you do comp shipping? Do you set special pricing? How's that going to affect you in the future? And it's like, there was things that we did right, and there was things that we did, I think, that we could have done differently. But I think overall, we had really good people in place. We pivoted. Like, I was doing wholesale a lot of the time. I bought a DJI Osmo handheld gimbal, and I would just be right out there doing Zooms with people all day long. And just like bringing them to this place, making them feel like they were in the vineyard. When we sold a lot of wine, we actually, increased distribution in markets. Our distribution program, really a lot of our things shifted to distribution. And Dylan and I had a record year. And we were like, when you're on a plane for 45 weeks a year, you're like, well, you don't have time to do follow-up, you don't have time to do planning, you're just like, what city am I in? Okay, cool, I got this. And so we got to slow down and we got to really kind of activate a strategic side of what we had learned over the past few years and really start to change the direction of our wholesale program and get out of like a lot of these buy the glass programs that really weren't doing anything for us in terms of revenue. You look at the costs and you're like, why are we doing this? It doesn't make any sense. And really focusing on where we can grow for the long term and what's the goal of making wines for distribution. Do you just want to make them so you can travel, or are you making them so you can get them in people's hands so they learn about your story, and how is that going to transition or translate into your higher end wines? And we did a really good job of kind of identifying the areas where we need to, when things come back on track, where we're going to go. And we moved quickly when the pandemic hit, which was huge. We realized that the key was going to be clear communication to our partners, and we just kind of like took everything and made visuals of everything and communication for wines that could go out to reps that was super clean, and turnkey programs where people didn't have to like look at your stuff and say, I don't know what I want to do. It's like, here's a program, here's the 3 options, here's, you want to do this, here's a virtual option, here's the wines we're going to do, here's your per ounce cost based on your market. If you do this for 40 people, this is your total cost. Here's the timeline, here's what we're going to do, here's the invitation sequence. And we did a lot of that, just like everybody was stressed out, like give people solutions. And that's what we did. We gave every client, we tried to create solutions for people, because nobody needed more problems, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, we did well. We were fortunate, it just goes to like the people who are supporters of Alexana, like they supported big time. And it was, I think a lot of people felt that way in the Valley. Like, I think we were all shocked at like, man, people are drinking a lot and they're drinking really good wines. So like, we're getting orders for all of our expensive wines. We're like, this isn't that bad actually. Like this, as long as this keeps going. So I felt like we were uniquely positioned in that sense. Like, we weren't a new brand. Fortunately, we got lucky. We had those relationships. Like, people who didn't have those relationships, who were starting distribution or starting their DTC programs, like that's a challenge that I don't even know how to even attack. But like, we were lucky that we had the relationships, we had the network, we had the reputation, that we could kind of see opportunities and plug things in. We had the tools. And then from a production standpoint, 2020, like everybody's got their own unique story. We're at this site. See the sun behind me. It's 3 o'clock. We have really good afternoon sun exposure. It's a dry farm vineyard. You can pick it early and get decent ripeness, like really good ripeness. So things started happening, reaction, Brian Well, get it going. We picked the whole vineyard in a couple days, which usually takes a month. So we brought stuff in. Yeah, we didn't make everything that we normally make, but the wines we made some, like the 2020 Ravana Vineyard Estate, the wine that's been top 100 twice. That wine's delicious. And I drink that wine with people who are very critical about wine, and they're like, "This is great." I'm like, oh, "Thank you, thank God." Yeah, and there was some stuff that we did that we kind of like didn't work out. But yeah, that was the biggest challenge, and we didn't really like. You look at that; that's 2.5 years ago, and like this last year, those decisions that were made, we had to work through those decisions this year. I think everybody in the Willamette Valley is like, either you didn't make wine or you made wine. You didn't make wine, it's a whole other set of challenges. And I've helped some friends who, kind of like playing it. Okay, well, as soon as your 21's coming, you got to get your 21. And people have kind of made that rush in relationship building and all that stuff. But if you made 20s, finding ways to sell those appropriately where they're consumed quickly, because it doesn't matter if they're affected or not. You want people to drink them. They're just not, as soon as everybody's 21s come out, 21 vintage is killer. People are going to be like 20 or 21. And it's just a reality. It's not, it's just a completely candid point to make. But yeah, we were lucky. We had good wines in 2020, and we saw growth in our membership. We sold more 2020 estate Pinot Noir current release than we have ever sold of any vintage in a 12-month cycle. And that was because of how we moved things around to focus on that. But, again, we made the growth happen in the places it needed to happen. It wasn't like, 2020, let's deal these down and get rid of them all. With some people, you have to do that sometimes. But yeah, we're fortunate. Again, it goes back to like, this is why you build good relationships with people. Because those are people, when things are challenging, they support you. And that's what, Dr. Ivana is always, those relationships with clients and things like that. He knows they're important, and he encourages us, whether we're in the tasting room or in the wholesale market or what, like, take care of those people. That's what matters. I don't care what kind of wine you make, what the price is. If people like you, they will buy more wine. If they don't like you, your wine gets enough points, they will still buy.
Put up with anything for a 98 wine, right?
Exactly. Yeah, totally. I think some people, you've been a part of this industry for 30 years, 12 seems laughable. And then you look at people who've been here for 3 years, and you're like, I'll give you some perspective. Yeah, I mean, I think motivations have changed. I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, why are people here and why are they making wine? And it's less about people just coming here because it's a pure passion. There's still that, obviously, that exists. But it's a business. And it's like, that business creates competition. And there's always going to be, we'll travel around and like what people say about Oregon, which I love, is like, and I feel that way, because like so many of my friends who work at other wineries, like I'm not telling you. It's like, hey, here's actually a contact that I have, like, help you get distribution. Here's a person that I found some products with, like, vendors. Like, here's a guy who makes awesome cardboard boxes that we use for our allocation shipments. Helping each other out. And there's always going to be that element of what makes Oregon different than other wine regions. But there's going to be an increase in competition, and I think that comes from necessity, because as nice as everybody wants to be, when there's finite resources, there's finite resources. And we're fortunate that we're in a growth cycle still, and visitation continues to increase. So we're like in an era of abundance, I would say, is what it feels like. It's like there's more competition than ever, but like there's also more demand than ever. And you look at Oregon as an industry, and you look at the acreage planted, and you're like, well, we're basically the same landmass size as New Zealand, and we make like a fraction of the wine that they produce. And we're still, 1% of U.S. wine production. So from like a production standpoint, the demand is incredible, because everyone still is able to be somewhat successful, because we're not, there's some people who make a lot of wine in the valley, but the majority of us, we're making a lot of people making less than 5,000, less than 10,000 cases. So, motivations are changing. You're seeing big companies come in. It's part of the ecosystem. It's necessary. They're doing it right, I think, in Oregon. You have really good people leading those organizations who respect the ethos of Oregon. But yeah, it definitely changes, because the finite resources we have, there's an abundance of demand, but it's people too. Like, I've had really good people poached by people that I know, and I'm like, cool, guys. You're like, that's what happens. And it's okay. It's like, you want people to grow. You want people to grow. You want to be happy for them. But yeah, things are changing in a good way. It's a necessary growth cycle for everything. And being part of Napa and being part of Argentina, you see kind of every region's different in its own way, but they all kind of follow an interesting trajectory of like the people who come in first, who are there for like pure passion. They're like going to show someone else that something's possible. Chip on the shoulder. Then there's the people who kind of like fall into the next phase. People like they were at other places and other neighboring areas, and they came in because they saw something, they want to be part of it, and they're like they have something, they're building on it, they're creating something. And then you have something Malcolm Gladwell. Then there's people who come in after that, and they're like from other regions who are like, this is a business opportunity. I'm coming in, and we want to be a part of this. It's a growing area. And then there's like the second generations that begin to happen, and then it becomes an investment. And then you have the VC companies and larger corporations who come in and buy things, and we're entering that phase. And like you saw that happen in Napa, it's still happening in Napa. Argentina, it's happened forever. And so you see every region kind of go through it, and there's just a finite amount of land here, and there's interesting kind of investments happening, but I think it's benefiting a lot of people. It definitely hurts some people because it's an entry point. Like you need a certain amount of money to now enter into the industry and play in the sandbox, and that's restrictive because to have your own estate vineyard is difficult, but because of that you end up with really amazing brands of people doing really creative stuff, maybe not from like the most known vineyards and things that are getting huge ratings, but some really amazing wines that aren't, you know, dogmatic in terms of this is what the Oregon wine industry does. And there's a lot of creative, talented people here who are just like, give them a little bit of resource and they're going to make it incredible. And I think that's a component of the competitive, or the increased competition, is that you have people who are trying to differentiate themselves, and through differentiation comes creativity and this whole trajectory towards like subcategories, and it also just brings more energy into the industry. And if everybody's just doing the same thing, that's not helping anybody. So it's like, let people, you know, there's people who do things really, really well and better than everybody else, but we have a huge spectrum of that in the Willamette Valley and beyond in Oregon in general. And to me, that's exciting because it's like, whether I'm traveling or I'm somewhere, someone's like, hey, have you had this? I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Like, I live there and I feel like I know a lot. And I'm like, I've never seen that before. What is this? This is cool. Taste it. And I'm like, this is it. Who's doing this? This person who was assistant winemaker here and here, and then that's happening. Like, I went to the Ribbon Ridge ABA tasting, and like, you know, you feel like you know a lot of people, and then you're like, man, Ribbon Ridge, apparently I don't know many people. You're like looking around, you're seeing all these small projects, and you're like, this is super cool. How many cases? Oh, we're making 300 cases. And I'm like, good for you. That's awesome, because you have to start somewhere. And like a lot of those brands you'll see 10 years from now super successful. Some of them might, you know, try it out, it doesn't work, but yeah, that's what's exciting, I think, about the industry right now. It's like, what is the next phase? Like, we're going to grow in channels where, you know, price point driven channels, and also in kind of like DTC in general, and people all over the world coming around, and on-prem, off-prem wholesale's continuing to grow. But I think we're going to create little subcategories that are going to continue to allow Oregon to grow outside of traditional channels.
Beyond that, what else do you see as you look down the line for Oregon wine?
Yeah, what do I see when I look down the line for Oregon wine? Yeah, you know, more of a curiosity. I don't really know. I think there's so many directions it could go, and I think that it's completely dependent on a lot with my generation of people who are kind of coming into leadership positions and the directions and decisions that they make for projects, and then also the incoming generation of what they value and what they do, and that goes for the people who are buying wine as well. And I think a lot of that's going to dictate what we do as an industry. And fortunately and unfortunately, you know, there's a limited subset of regions around the world that grow cool climate grape varieties extremely well. You know, Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, Riesling, you know, whatever people are doing here. That beyond that, you know, there's a lot of stuff, Müller Thurgau and Solaner and all kinds of fun stuff. There's a limited set of places that do that really well, and we're fortunate to be in that window of places. So I think as long as we can do that, there's only so little Burgundy out there that's available at a price point people can afford. People are making insanely good Chardonnays here. Like, I'm fortunate my wife is a winemaker, and she's a winemaker for a company, a brand, and a vineyard that makes absolutely insane Chardonnay. So we get to do fun comp sets all the time and drink white Burgundy that we could never afford. And you taste that white Burgundy next to some of these Oregon Shards, and we're not Burgundy, but like the quality's at the same level a lot. So you're like, this is incredible. Like, so as long as there's a need in the market, and we produce wines that fill that need, and we are also creating our own sub-market because of the incredible places that we have that are real places, not brands. That's always going to be engaging to people. And people love coming to Oregon based on what we're seeing for visitation.
Because they can surf and snowboard in the same day.
Yeah, right. Because all of our buyers are surfers and snowboarders. No, I think people, and it also like localize kind of what's going to happen. I'm super interested in what's going to happen in the towns here. Like you look at, I'm in Napa tomorrow, and I go to St. Helena, and you're like, people, 19, this house is only this. You're like, is that Dundee? Is that Newburgh? I don't, Carlton. Like, things are going to change. Things are going to be more expensive. Development will happen. I'm really interested to see what that does for everything. I mean, it's going to change the culture in the region, kind of who is here doing what. I'm just kind of curious what goes on from a visitation standpoint. If we have infrastructure, if there's more people who are going to come out and build, restaurants and hotels, or without restaurants and hotels, people want to come here and they want to experience great wine, but they also want to have those amenities and those comforts and those parts of the experience. You don't read an article, 48 hours in Willamette Valley, and they're like, sorry, there's no place to go. Like, they have to mention great places, and as that continues to grow, reasons to come out here will grow with it. Because the wine is at a level that I think anybody who is a true wine lover comes out here and you're impressed. Like, you're just like, this is awesome. Like, I went to 12 wineries this weekend and I loved all of them. Like, that happens all the time. But, with it, we're also in a rural area. So, the wine industry has definitely advanced faster than the region that we're located in outside of Portland. And I feel comfortable saying that coming from a small town in Kansas. So, there's a lot happening, but yeah, that takes time. And it's a natural evolution that occurs in any community over time, but
What about the future here at Alexana?
Yeah, I think our future is, we're fortunate, first of all, like just gratitude in general, that we're in the Dundee Hills, in an area that people know. People come here, all of our neighbors, they're incredible. The better work that they do, the more people come here. We have 100 acres of vines now. We have this incredible facility. Like, I'm building an outdoor kitchen now and starting that, and have people come out and just, again, leaning into create spaces and experiences that engage with people emotionally. And I want people to be able to come out to Alexana and, engage with this piece of property, with Dr. Ivana's story, with the place, the people, the process, and the purpose. Like, those are the things that give people, a reason to engage. And I think we do a good job of that. And we're continuing to develop unique spaces that allow people to come out here, 3 or 4 times over a period of years and have a different experience, a unique experience. Not just like, hey, we switched the lines up, you're tasting at this table. It's like, no, you're out on a vineyard platform, or you're in the barrel room, or you're on a rover tour. Like, there's so much. Even me, like, I've been here for almost 9 years, and I get in the rover, we drive around and like go see something. I'm like, never seen the vineyard from this perspective. This is really cool. It's like, next time I'm gonna take someone over here. And you do that, and people are like, I've been a member here for 7 years, and I didn't even. And you're like, yeah, this place. They're like, this place is my favorite. And you're like, yes, that's what I'm going for. I think the future's insanely bright. Comes down to team. Like, my biggest responsibility is, keep that growth going in a sustainable way. Like, this is always the challenge, I think, for some wineries. You reach a level where you're like, things are good, they're really good, but you get the pressures to grow. How do you grow without diminishing experience and diminishing quality? And I think just reminding myself of that at every decision we make. I talked to Tress Burns, our winemaker, and Andrew Emmerden, our assistant winemaker. It's like, here's the thresholds, high and low production. Within that's a qualitative decision for us to make as a team. And we have really productive conversations about, like, here's the style that the direction we're going, comp sets, you taste it, and those guys are super dialed in. They make really great decisions. And our enologist Rose Ballantyne and cellar master Tim Holtz, like, we have such an incredible production team. and to have the dialogue with them and the trust that we can have these conversations, and they know exactly everything that they're doing follows that strategy and that vision, and we all know what's going to happen. And the wines that are going to come from Alexana over the next couple of years, I have a ton of confidence that the best years of Alexana are definitely ahead of us. Mm-hmm. And I feel very authentic in saying that. We're primed. And I think that what we can do with the property next door, 60-acre property almost contiguous to us, right next to the Thomas Vineyard and Domain Streams, 2 barns and us, and it's like this blank slate. Like, what do you want to do? Like, let's do something that complements Alexana, but like make it unique in the Willamette Valley. So there's a ton of really fun conversations that we're having, like all last weekend with Dr. Ivana and the team, where it's like, what could it be? What can we do? So there's some ideas that we have that I think, again, just have this little pocket of the Dundee Hills that can really be in a beautiful spectrum of experience and personalities that I think it gives a lot of engagement points to different people. Mm-hmm. Different types of buyers, collectors, sommeliers, and just like the people in the wine industry. I think we want people to look at us and respect us for what we do and how we do it. At the end of the day, like genuine respect for that. And we look at people, and I think, the wine industry, there's ways to do things the right way, and there's ways to do things other ways, and always want to fall on the right side of the line. It's not easy to do too, because there's easy decisions, and usually the easy decision is not always the best long-term decision.
Mm-hmm. What about what's next for you in your future, either professional or otherwise future? What are you looking ahead to?
Yeah, I have a 1-year-old son, Frey, and my wife, Jamie, is an amazing winemaker. We talk about this a lot. Well, Frey doesn't, he's 1, he's blurbing about it. But, we talk about, I love what I do, to be honest. I've been approached about stuff, and it's always, it feels good to get that, but it's like, I'm engaged. I love what I'm doing. With Dr. Ivana, he's an idea person, and I'm an idea person, and sometimes that's dangerous. And we get going on these ideas, and there's a lot of stuff that's on the table right now that I think is going to be amazing to actualize over the next, I think there's enough stuff going on that I think the next 3 to 5 years for me and the team is going to be really, really fun. And I think that, regardless of how long people stay here and what they do, it's something that if someone's here for the next 3 to 5 years, they're going to be part of something really amazing. And I think people will look at this property and this team in a different way than they have in the past. And, we're going to do some fun stuff, some really fun stuff. And I think put some wines out there that I think people are really blown away by, and I think create experiences that people really enjoy and have fun doing it.
What advice would you have for someone who was interested in joining the Oregon wine industry?
Yeah, advice for someone joining the Oregon wine industry. Oof. Yeah, it's so dependent on what they want to do. I get people who reach out to me all the time, people I've met on the road for distribution, people who want to find an entry point. And I think the biggest piece of advice people want to join the Oregon wine industry is you have to really want it. I think it's competitive. There's a lot of talent here already. And as much as we are growing, it's still extremely competitive for those positions that are what everybody's shooting for. And that besides really wanting it, you have to really kind of put yourself out there and let people know that you want it and prove it. And it's for me, it's when people come here and they want to work, and it's give everyone an opportunity, but take advantage of that opportunity, put yourself in it 100%. There's no shortcuts. I think there are shortcuts, but I think to be there in kind of a sustainable long-term way, there are no shortcuts. You got to know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of people who get into positions who pretend like they know what they're doing, and that doesn't last very long. And I think that, ask people questions. The biggest thing for me is ask questions. If you don't know, that's normal. Don't pretend you know what you're doing. If it's important for you to know what you're doing, ask people questions. I learned, I feel like I know a fair amount about, I've done every position, I know a lot more than I think some people do in my position because I've worked every single aspect in different wine regions for the company and seen every angle. And I still learn so much. I'm asking the team questions all the time because the technology is changing and what's happening. Like, ask those questions. There's something to learn from everybody. And especially use your resources out here. Like, there's so many amazing people. And I think you ask people who are in my position now, 10 years ago, what they would have asked people. And it's like, think about that. What 10 years from now, the people who are in those positions you need to be asking questions to, ask them because they might not be accessible to you in 10 years. And people get popular and they get busy, and those people are really hard to connect with. And I always feel bad because I have people ask me questions and not to, I prioritize getting back to them, but there's other stuff that's, my team is more important to me. So I take their stuff first and other things with clients and then get back to people. But, connect with people. Don't be afraid of it. And put it out there in the universe. I think what happened to me, like I just, if I'd have been just at home sending emails to people back in Kansas trying to get a job, I wouldn't be here. I went out and, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And then don't get too comfortable when you get comfortable. So, yeah.
It's good. I like the sequel to the original quote there. That's excellent. All right, well, that's all the questions that I have for you. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover that you'd like to cover?
I think I over talked everything. So.
No, it's fantastic, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing stories on this lovely December day. Don't tell anybody that it's this lovely in December sometimes on your porch here, and we're going to let you off the hook.
Cool. Thank
you.
Rich. Appreciate it.